Michael Stutchbury is back at the Australian Financial Review after a long absence, and he's not wasting any time.
Basic message I've told the staff is three things. One is to concentrate on breaking news, and it may sound a bit heretical these days that a newspaper that comes out every morning can actually break news amid the 24/7 news cycle, but I think it can and it needs to. So first message to staff is we've got to be a news breaking newspaper. Secondly, we've got to be agenda setting, and the Financial Review has a very long history of being a very much an agenda setting newspaper. Going back into the 60s and the 1970s, the Australian Financial Review was the political economy paper of its time.
Part of the plan to bring that back involves ramping up overseas coverage with a new London bureau.
I think we have been a little bit exposed through the Euro crisis in not having a permanent correspondent in Europe. China's and Asia is very important, but we do have a global financial system since the crisis in 2008 is now going through another stage of it. We do have a stringer very well known to us who used to work here, who we've activated, Andrew McCarthy in Berlin. We had Jeff Weinstock, one of our people, over just in the last few weeks for a couple of weeks that covered the latest round of Euro crisis, and so I'm keen to increase our coverage out of Europe as well. And as well, I'd be keen to, wherever I can, to increase our coverage out of Asia, out of China, and out of India, which I think is another big area to go. It's a valid question. I'd like to do more everywhere, and Europe is a big story where I think we need to cover strongly as well. Whether you call it agenda setting or campaigning, I think you do have to focus on the areas that are of interest to the paper and especially of interest to its readership. And if you go back in the Financial Review's history, the Financial Review was agenda setting in the 1990s when it was the first to send correspondents to Tokyo to really cover the rise of Japan as an industrial power and the rise of them as our #1 export market and buying iron ore, which opened up their Pilbara in the 1960s. That was setting the agenda, saying this is a big story for the country. Similarly, the Fin Review has had a long history of being a critic of the Industrial Relations Club and industrial relations and wage setting arrangements, the old arbitration system, the power of the unions. The Financial Review has got a long history in really campaigning, if you like, or pointing out the economic costs of that sort of system. So it's well within the Financial Review's heritage and traditions to have a very clear focus on the things you think are important and to go after them vigorously.
For all the talk of Fairfax heritage, there's an awful lot of news limited at the Fin Review these days. Brett Clegg, Financial Review Group boss, was poached from the Australian, as was Stutchbury. They've been joined by reporters James Chessel, Tracy Lee, Nabila Ahmed. So is Michael Stutchbury missing the Australian?
No, not at all. No, this is incredible. The Australian is a wonderful newspaper. I had a fantastic time at the Australian. I'm incredibly grateful for the time I had there. 13 years, and I learned a hell of a lot. It's a really, Australian is at its high watermark of its historic influence over Australian journalism and over Australian life. It's a wonderful thing, but I don't really think about that at all now because my mind is so taken up with the challenge at hand here at the Financial Review, which again is another great paper and a great part of journalistic institutions in Australia. So those people you mentioned, most of them came over in a way almost before my move over here, and in a way you can sense that they were people that came from the Fin Review in the last few years over to the Australian, and I think you're probably seeing a bit of a natural rebalancing from the people who did come over, some of which might go back again to the Fin Review. But you always get a little bit of, things do go round and round. You notice that in this business, but I'm not missing the Australian. I really appreciate my time there, but I tell you, my head's taken up, is totally full with the issue of the Financial Review, and that's a wonderful thing. I wake up in the morning, every morning, thinking, what are we going to do? And we're going to do the very best job we're going to do today. So in a way, you don't think about so much the competition day by day, you think about what you're going to do. But there is no doubt that the way the media market is evolving in Australia, and you can see that in the US as well, where the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal become more and more competitors as the national upmarket, if you like, newspapers, and probably you can see it that the Australian itself over the last 10 years has become more of a business paper. It's put a challenge up to the Financial Review, and I think just the way that market, the national market, is evolving more, away from being a national market, away from just being straight state-based markets where all the media was pretty much divided in the pre-digital days, you do tend to see the Australian and the Fin Review probably being closer competitors than they used to be. There are differences in culture, and news is a culture of having a very strong proprietor over decades, and you have a very strong sense of proprietorial culture. Fairfax doesn't have, or hasn't had a proprietor for virtually a generation now, and there is a certain sort of focus that you do get in news. And I think the best of, I learn a lot at news, and a lot about sort of sharpness of news stories. And the best of that, I think you can take some of that and use it at a paper such as the Fin Review. And I do want to bring probably a sharper news focus.